Ubisoft is well and truly cooked. Actually, if anything, that's an understatement. This frog has been boiled, served, eaten, digested, and finally at long last squeezed out through some overweight fat Frenchman's arsehole. And they are fully and utterly aware of the journey that they've taken. You've probably heard several times now, of course, that Ubisoft over the course of the 5 last years have shed over 80% of their market value. Their lowest low recently was when their stock dipped down to $9. It has since rallied up to 10, with the delay of Assassin's Creed Shadows and its pushback into February, which is of course Black History Month, in one of the single most desperate Hail Marys I think we've ever seen in the gaming industry. But it gets a lot worse than that as well. See, Ubisoft knows that it is in an awful position, and I've gotten some interesting information from my Amazon insider relating to it. First and foremost, Ubisoft has sent a word to Amazon, who run their servers for their online storefront, that they will no longer be adding to it or updating it. They will simply merely be maintaining it for those who already have games on the storefront. Other than that, there will be no further additions to the Ubisoft storefront. Well, this is Ubisoft Connect now, what once used to be Ubi Play. This indicates, of course, then that Ubisoft has completely given up on their effort to create their own storefront and will instead be putting all of their future titles, assuming there will be any future titles, directly on Steam exclusively. Now, it's a sad day for Ubisoft because they, along with so many other companies, thought that they could cut out the middleman and simply take all of the profits for themselves, but none of them had the balls to do what was required to actually achieve that ambition. Origins, for example, the EA undertaking, was probably the closest. With Origin's monetary might, it could easily have led the charge into an actual digital product era and say, okay, on Origin you are going to buy a digital product at a digital price. We are no longer going to give a cut to GameStop or whatever shop, and we are no longer going to need to actually print physical copies. Thus, we are going to give you the $60 video game at $40. They did not. Instead, they figured to themselves, maybe we could just do all the greed at the same time and take full price for a digital product whilst also cutting out the intermediaries. This, of course, meant that they found themselves in direct competition with Steam, a bigger, better entrenched platform with more of a loyal user base and a much, much better name to boot, and they lost. Everybody else who tried to make their own storefronts also lost. But I think Ubisoft is probably one of the first to fully just surrender that market completely now. But what else are they supposed to do? The only way Ubisoft could even possibly avoid bankruptcy right now is if they cut their company to the bone. Any and all superfluous fat must be trimmed and burned for simple survival's sake. Furthermore, Ubisoft has also, of course, gotten themselves a lot of enemies. A lot of very aggressive enemies, apparently, as, according to, again, my Amazon insider, so as always, take any insider tips with a grain of salt, etc., but I do have a ticket on this. Ubisoft has been under sustained DDoS attack for the last 3 or so days. DDoS attacks that were still ongoing a couple of days ago when I got this news, so, they've really pissed somebody off. You know, it would be really, really funny if this turned out to be the Japanese government or something. I'm not accusing you here, Japan, or anything like that. I'm not making any allegations. I'm just saying the biggest group of people that Ubisoft may have pissed off royally recently would be the Japanese, you know, the ones that brought up Assassin's Creed Shadows in their goddamn government to discuss whether or not it was just a straight up insult to the nation, which, spoiler alert, yes, it pretty much is. Anywho, Ubisoft then is now sitting in a situation where they're going to give up on their storefront. They can't afford to keep it going. They are going to crawl back to Steam and take whatever deal they're willing to give them, and to be fair, they'll probably just give them the standard deal of taking 30% of their sales. And they've also made plenty of enemies. Is there any recovering whatsoever from Ubisoft at this point? Unlikely. The situation is probably, in fact, if anything, worse than we already think it is. The company had suffered serious economic damage after the failure of Skull and Bones, for example, which has been in development since 2013, I point out, where I think it was originally supposed to be some sort of sequel side grade to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, as people of course were begging for more of the naval combat in that. Then, when they couldn't quite get it to work, they decided to try and transition it into some sort of an MMO. That didn't work either. Eventually they happened upon the kind of piratey action World of Warships-y style kind of formula, and then that was what they started to push, and it received decent receptions for a while there. If they had released it within a reasonable time frame, 5-6 odd years ago plus, perhaps the game would have had only some middling reaction, right? But the game took so long to develop that it became outdated before it could actually release. The technology it was relying upon became yesterday's news and then the day after's news, etc., before they could even get it ready to push it out the door. And even when it finally was released, it wasn't really ready. They weren't done with it even then, but they only had that. That was all they had. That was the best product they could possibly get, and they shoved it out the door in the hope that it would somehow salvage something. It didn't. Star Wars Outlaws was then expected to pick up a lot of the slack for this, of course, because it was a Star Wars title. How could that possibly fail? It's goddamn Star Wars. And again, if this was 10 plus years ago, it would probably have worked. But it isn't. And Star Wars Outlaws was also not exactly a video game designed with the times in mind, shall we say, as it had some nasty progressive design on its female main character, and so it too flopped. Perhaps Assassin's Creed Shadows could somehow rally things after that, but here's the thing. Assassin's Creed Shadows is probably going to do alrightish at best. Those people, because Assassin's Creed has become a fairly entrenched franchise at this point. It has brand recognition, not the equal to, but along sort of kind of the similar-ish vein as Call of Duty, where people who enjoy Assassin's Creed will just buy Assassin's Creed. They're not really into the wider gaming sort of sphere, and so they won't really care about the larger controversy. And the addition of a character like Yasuke, honestly, I would have called that Viking 5 years ago. Easy that they would have done that if they were ever going to Japan. They will have chased off a fair few of their core audience, absolutely, but they will still probably do decently. However, Ubisoft is not in a position where doing decently is going to save them. Probably one of the reasons why they decided to push Assassin's Creed back into Black History Month is partially because of Black History Month, and partially because they didn't want to give the information about the pre-orders to the investors. I have also been told from my Amazon insiders that they have indeed cancelled all of the pre-orders, not just the pre-orders, but they've withdrawn the CD keys. So they'd already issued Amazon with a series of CD keys to be sold on their site. All of these have been withdrawn, also of course at Amazon's expense. Ubisoft's expense, excuse me. My brain farted there for a second. Ubisoft understands that it is not going to be selling very well. It is going to need to try and cut its losses as much as humanly possible, and at this point they're basically just hoping to turn it into a write-off for another project that could potentially save them. I would not at all be surprised, mind you, if a couple of things happen. Firstly, there will finally be some Beyond Good and Evil 2 news for those who are waiting for that game, and you will be told that it's right around the corner. In fact, they might even push towards opening something like pre-orders. The game will be shoved out the door, and you will be sad, but just maybe, just maybe, Ubisoft will have your money by then. Or they might do something that I've also heard alleged for Amazon, namely that several of the larger companies are thinking about launching some sort of a false anti-woke campaign, where they will be pretending as if they are creating video games and aimed at the anti-woke market without actually going through with it. Now, the recent Ghost of Yorte, now that's of course not connected here in any way, but it does strike me as a slightly suspicious connection there. Again, no actual connection, I'm just saying that it's a game with some progressive elements in it, hiring progressive people, including Erika Ishii, the voice actress, that at the same time doesn't do anything so overtly as to make it easy to react against it and label it woke. Or at the very least, there isn't sufficient evidence to simply slap it with the label immediately, in my opinion. I'm not saying the two are related in any way, I'm just saying this might be a playbook that we are going to see more of in the future. But hey, if it will actually produce something resembling a normal video game, I might be willing to live with it. We'll have to wait and see, I suppose, if Ubisoft even lives that long, as I would be surprised if it remains a publicly traded company for another year, and I'd probably be even more surprised if we were still talking about Ubisoft in 5 years' time. I just hope that they'll somehow allow Anno 117 to squeeze its way out the door and receive enough funding for DLC and expansions before the company finally croaks. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening. I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.